You are listening to HOA Backfired. She tried to find me for weather. I am standing in my driveway at 11:45 at night in Bend, Oregon, watching a tow truck back up toward my car, and Evelyn Smith is screaming at me that I damaged common property and need to pay immediately or she will have my vehicle impounded for non-compliance. The wind chill is somewhere around 15 degrees. My breath comes out in clouds. Evelyn is wearing a black parka and a black knit hat, her dark brown ponytail whipping in the wind as she waves a clipboard at me like it is a warrant. Her scarf flaps behind her like a flag. I am in my green winter jacket and blue beanie, gripping a pen so hard my knuckles are white, trying not to lose my mind. This started 3 weeks ago. I moved to Bend for a job in IT support, working from home in a quiet neighborhood called Silver Slush Court. The HOA here treats neighbors like suspects during winter. Every snow event turns into an enforcement blitz. I thought I could keep my head down, follow the rules, sell the house in spring, and get out clean. I was wrong. The first notice showed up after I left a windshield ice scraper on my porch ledge. Evelyn claimed it was visible storage. The fine was $50. I thought it was insane, but I paid it because I am trying to sell the house and winter violations could poison disclosures. I could not afford to have liens or compliance flags on my record when buyers started looking. Then she escalated. She took a staged photo, standing inches from my property line, angling the shot to make the snow on my driveway look like it was spilling onto the sidewalk. She claimed I was creating a slip hazard. Another $50 fine. I shoveled immediately, but the fine stuck. 2 days later, she claimed I damaged common property. She said my snow pile from shoveling had pushed slush onto the grass strip between the sidewalk and the curb, and now the HOA had to pay for resodding in spring. She demanded $300. Immediately. Or $50 per day until I paid. I told her I did not damage anything. The slush was from the plow truck, not from my shoveling. She did not care. She said the HOA Compliance Patrol had documented it, and if I did not pay, she would escalate to a lien. She said, I can make this a lien conversation in one email. That line stuck with me. She said it with this smug little smile, like she had done this 100 times and no one had ever fought back. I started gathering evidence. I checked my doorbell camera footage. I pulled up the HOA budget records online. I started asking questions. And I found something. The enforcement was selective. Evelyn had hit 6 other homeowners with bogus snow violations in the past month. All of them paid. None of them fought. And the fines were going into a line item called Winter Compliance Recovery. But the amounts did not match the actual vendor invoices for snow removal or salting. The numbers were off by thousands. I also found something else. The notices Evelyn had been sending were backdated. She would write a violation notice, dated a week earlier, then claim you were already late and owed late fees on top of the original fine. The timestamps on the PDFs did not match the dates on the letters. I did not play my hand yet, and she thought that meant I had none. Then she kicked it up another level. She sent the compliance patrol to my house at 10:30 at night. 2 guys in a white van with Silver Slush Court HOA enforcement stenciled on the side, no readable text visible but the van clearly marked. They had flashlights. They walked around my property, shining lights on my porch, my driveway, my trash cans. One of them took photos of my bright orange driveway snow stakes. The same stakes I had put up to mark the edge of my driveway so the plow would not hit my mailbox. The next morning, Evelyn sent me an email. She said the stakes were unapproved modifications to common property sightlines and needed to be removed immediately. $50 fine. She also said the nighttime inspection had revealed additional violations, including improper snow storage, and she was scheduling a hearing. I called the management company. They told me Evelyn was the fines and enforcement coordinator and she had full authority to issue violations under the winter emergency rules. They said if I wanted to dispute anything, I needed to request a hearing in writing and pay a $100 hearing fee up front. I paid the fee, I requested the hearing, and I started building my case. The neighbor across the street, a guy named Ron, saw the whole thing. He had been watching Evelyn for months. He told me she had been hitting people with violations all winter, always targeting the same houses, always escalating right before people were about to sell or refinance. He said she bragged about her collection rate at board meetings. Ron also told me something else. A mail carrier named Clara had seen Evelyn posting notices repeatedly on the same houses, sometimes 3 or 4 copies of the same notice on different days, just to create a paper trail that made it look like homeowners were ignoring repeated warnings. I asked Clara if she would be willing to testify. She said yes. Then my orange snow stakes started disappearing. The first one vanished on a Tuesday. The second one was gone by Thursday. I replaced them. They disappeared again. I set up my doorbell camera to record the driveway all night. I caught Evelyn on video. She walked up to my driveway at 6 in the morning, pulled one of the stakes out of the snow, and tossed it into the bushes at the edge of the common area. She did not know the camera had night vision. Her face was clear as day. I saved the clip. I did not send it to her. I did not confront her. I just waited. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. But before the hearing, Evelyn sent me another notice. This one said the HOA had received a report that my car was parked in violation of winter emergency access rules and would be towed if not moved within 24 hours. My car was in my driveway. It had been in my driveway the entire winter. There was no violation. But Evelyn did not care. She called a tow company. That is how I ended up in my driveway at 11:45 at night, watching a tow truck back up toward my car. The driver was a guy in his 50s, wearing a heavy coat and a beanie. He had the repo hook out and was lining it up with my front bumper. Evelyn was standing next to him, yelling at me. She said, "You were notified. You ignored the notice. This is an emergency tow under HOA authority. You can pay the tow fee and the violation fine now, or you can pick up your car at the impound lot tomorrow and pay double." I said, "This is not a legal tow. My car is on my property. You do not have authority to tow a car from private property without a court order." She said, "I am calling management, and I am going to be dramatic about it. You are in violation of winter emergency rules, and this is going to cost you every day you fight it." The tow driver looked uncomfortable. He said, "Ma'am, if this is private property, I need to see a signed authorization from the owner." Evelyn waved her clipboard. She said, "I have authorization from the HOA. That is all you need." I pulled out my phone. I said, "I have the deed. I own this property. She does not have authority to tow my car." The driver stopped. He looked at me. He looked at Evelyn. He said, "I need a signed authorization from the property owner. If you do not have that, I cannot tow this vehicle." Evelyn lost it. She started screaming at the driver. She said, "You are under contract with the HOA. You do what I tell you to do, or I will report you to the management company and you will lose the contract." The driver shook his head. He said, "Lady, I am not risking a lawsuit over a $50 tow. If he owns the property, I cannot touch the car." He unhooked the repo arm. He got back in his truck. He drove away. Evelyn stood there in the driveway shaking with rage. She said, "This is not over. You just made this a lien conversation. I am filing a hearing report tonight, and you are going to pay for every single violation, plus late fees, plus the cost of tonight's tow attempt." I said, "File whatever you want. I will see you at the hearing." She walked away. I went inside. I uploaded the doorbell footage to a secure folder. I printed out the budget records. I printed out the backdated notices with the mismatched timestamps. I printed out the enforcement policy that showed Evelyn was skipping required steps on purpose. The hearing was in 6 days. The next morning, I got a call from a neighbor I barely knew. Her name was Linda. She lived 3 houses down. She said Evelyn had been calling her, asking her to keep an eye on my property and report any violations. She said Evelyn had been doing this with multiple neighbors, building a network of unpaid snow spies. Linda said she was not comfortable with it. She said Evelyn had been pressuring her to sign a statement saying she had witnessed me creating a slip hazard. Linda refused. I thanked her. I asked if she would be willing to testify at the hearing. She said yes. 2 days before the hearing, Evelyn sent me a new notice. This one included a photo. It was a close-up of the slush near my curb, taken from an angle that made it look like a huge mess. But I recognized the spot. It was the same patch of slush the plow had left. And I could see something in the photo that Evelyn had missed. There was an orange traffic cone in the background, half buried in snow. It was one of the cones the plow company used to mark storm drains. The cone proved the slush was from the plow, not from my shoveling. I saved the photo. I added it to my evidence folder. The hearing was scheduled for 7 in the evening at the clubhouse. I showed up at 6:45. The room was set up like a courtroom, with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of chairs for residents. There were maybe 15 people in the room, most of them other homeowners who had been hit with violations. Evelyn was sitting at the front table with 3 board members. One of them was a guy named Frank, who I recognized from the neighborhood. He always smiled and waved when I saw him, but tonight he was sitting there with a blank expression, pretending to be neutral. The hearing started. Evelyn read off the list of violations. Visible storage. Slip hazard. Damage to common property. Unapproved modifications. Emergency parking violation. She said the total fines were $950 plus late fees of $200 plus the cost of the failed tow attempt, which she listed as $75. She said if I did not pay within 10 days, the HOA would file a lien. I asked if I could present my evidence. The board president, a woman named Carol, said I had 5 minutes. I stood up. I walked to the front of the room. I pulled out a tab timeline I had prepared. I slid it across the table to the board members and handed copies to the other homeowners in the room at the same time. I said, this is a timeline of every notice I received, with the date stamps from the PDF files compared to the dates on the letters. You will see that every notice was backdated by at least 5 days. That means I was being charged late fees for violations I had not been notified of yet. The room went silent. Frank looked at the timeline. Carol looked at the timeline. Evelyn did not move. I said, I also have budget records showing that the fines collected under winter compliance recovery do not match the vendor invoices for snow removal or salting. The HOA has collected over $18,000 in fines this winter, but only $6,000 went to actual vendors. I would like to know where the other $12,000 went. Evelyn stood up. She said, this is out of order. Budget questions are not part of a violation hearing. I said, they are when the violations are fabricated to generate revenue. Carol said, we will need to review this. The hearing is postponed pending an audit. Evelyn said, you cannot postpone a hearing. The violations stand until he proves otherwise. I said, I can prove otherwise right now. I pulled out the doorbell footage. I played the clip of Evelyn pulling the orange snow stake out of my driveway and tossing it into the bushes. I played it on my phone, holding it up so everyone in the room could see. I said, this is Evelyn removing my property and then fining me for not having it in place. That is vandalism and fraud. The room exploded. People started yelling. One of the other homeowners stood up and said Evelyn had done the same thing to him. Another woman said Evelyn had threatened to file a lien if she did not pay a fine for a violation that never happened. Frank looked at Evelyn. He said, "Is this true?" Evelyn said, "I am calling management and I am going to be dramatic about it. This is a coordinated attack and I will not sit here and be accused of fraud." She grabbed her clipboard and walked out. Carol said, "We are suspending this hearing. The board will meet an emergency session tomorrow night to review these allegations." If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmares where the little guy wins. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 7 the next night. I showed up early. So did Ron. So did Clara, the mail carrier. So did Linda, the neighbor Evelyn had tried to recruit as a spy. So did 4 other homeowners who had been hit with bogus fines. The board members were already there, Carol, Frank, and a third member named Steve. Evelyn was not there. Carol said, "Evelyn has submitted her resignation as Fines and Enforcement Coordinator, effective immediately. The board has voted to accept her resignation and to launch a full audit of all winter violations issued this season." She said, "We have also contacted the management company. They have confirmed that Evelyn was acting outside her authority when she authorized the tow attempt and when she issued several of the notices without following the required notification process." She said, "All fines issued under Evelyn's authority this winter are being automatically refunded. You should see the refunds in your HOA accounts within 10 business days." The room erupted in applause. Ron clapped me on the shoulder. Clara smiled. Linda nodded. But I was not done yet. I said, "I appreciate the refunds, but I want to know what happens to Evelyn. She committed fraud. She vandalized my property. She threatened me with illegal towing. What is the consequence?" Carol said, "The board does not have the authority to pursue criminal charges. That is up to you. But we can refer this matter to the management company for further action." I said, "I already filed a police report. I submitted the doorbell footage and the backdated notices as evidence. I also submitted a complaint to the state HOA ombudsman." Frank looked uncomfortable. He said, "We did not know this was happening. Evelyn handled enforcement on her own. We trusted her." I said, "That is the problem. You gave her unchecked authority, and she abused it. The policy requires a warning before a fine. It requires photographic evidence with timestamps. It requires board approval for any fine over $100. She skipped every single step." I pulled out the enforcement policy document. I had highlighted the sections Evelyn had violated. I submitted it as a formal exhibit at the hearing and watched her face change, except she was not in the room, but Carol and Frank and Steve all read it, and their faces changed instead. Carol said, "We will make sure this does not happen again. We are revising the enforcement policy to require board approval for all fines and to require time-stamped photographic evidence with third-party verification." I said, "Good. And I want the management company to discipline the rep who enabled it." Someone at that company had to know what Evelyn was doing. They were getting copies of every notice. They were processing the fines. They did not say a word. Carol said, "We will include that in our referral." The meeting ended. I walked out into the parking lot. The sky was overcast, heavy gray clouds, snow starting to fall again. My breath came out in clouds. I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Ron caught up with me. He said, "You did it, man. You took her down." I said, "She took herself down. I just showed people what she was doing." Ron said, "Most people would have just paid the fines and moved on." "You fought." I said, "I did not have a choice. I am trying to sell this house. I could not have liens and violations on my record." Ron said, "Well, you are clear now. And you just saved a lot of people a lot of money. 2 days later, I got a call from the management company. The rep I had spoken to before, the one who told me Evelyn had full authority, was no longer handling Silver Slush Court. A new rep was assigned. The new rep apologized for what had happened and said the company was conducting an internal review. I also got a call from a lawyer. One of the other homeowners, a guy named Paul, had decided to file a class action lawsuit against Evelyn and the management company for fraudulent fines and harassment. He asked if I wanted to join. I said yes. The lawsuit moved slowly, but it moved. Discovery turned up more backdated notices. It turned up emails where Evelyn had bragged to the management company about her collection rate. It turned up evidence that the management company had ignored multiple complaints from homeowners over the past 2 years. The management company settled. Every homeowner who had been hit with a bogus fine got a refund, plus damages, plus legal fees. Evelyn was banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. But the best moment came a month later. I was at the neighborhood gate one morning, waiting for a vendor to arrive. The gate system had been acting up, and the HOA had called a technician to check the access logs. I was standing there with Carol and Steve watching the technician work. The technician pulled up the logs on his laptop. He said, "You have a lot of after-hours access events. Someone has been using a master code to open the gate at weird times." Carol said, "What times?" The technician said, "Late at night. 2, 3 in the morning. And it is always the same code." He read the code number out loud. Steve said, "That is Evelyn's code." The technician scrolled through the logs. He said, "She has been opening the gate and driving through the neighborhood at least 3 times a week for the past 6 months. Always after midnight." Carol said, "What was she doing?" I said, "Compliance patrols." She was looking for violations. The technician kept scrolling. He said, "There is something else." She logged in on the same nights that several of these violations were issued, and the timestamps match up with the photo timestamps on the notices. Carol looked at me. She said she was creating the violations. I said, and then backdating the notices to make it look like we ignored warnings. The gate logs became part of the lawsuit. They proved Evelyn had been systematically targeting homeowners, documenting violations in the middle of the night, and then issuing backdated notices to create a paper trail. Her own surveillance work became the evidence that destroyed her defense. A few weeks later, I got an email from Paul, the guy who had organized the class action lawsuit. He said Evelyn had tried to submit her own staged photos as evidence that the violations were legitimate. But the photos included metadata that proved they were taken after the violation dates listed on the notices. Karen's staged photos got used against her. The final settlement included a clause that required the management company to implement new oversight protocols for all enforcement actions. Every fine had to be approved by at least 2 board members. Every notice had to include time-stamped photos with metadata. Every homeowner had the right to request a third-party review before a lien could be filed. The board also voted to remove Evelyn from all HOA communications and to ban her from attending meetings. But the karma moment I will never forget happened at a public meeting 3 months later. The board was presenting the new enforcement policy to the community. Carol was reading through the changes. When she got to the section on photographic evidence, she stopped. She said, "We also want to address what happened this winter. Several homeowners were targeted with fabricated violations. The board takes full responsibility for failing to provide adequate oversight." She said, "We have reviewed all of the evidence submitted by residents, including video footage, access logs, and budget records. We have determined that the former enforcement coordinator acted outside her authority and violated multiple HOA policies." She said, as a result, the board has voted to issue formal apologies to all affected homeowners and to refund all fines collected under the Winter Compliance Program. Then, she said something I did not expect. She said, "We also want to recognize one homeowner who refused to back down and who brought this misconduct to our attention. Without his persistence, we would not have uncovered the extent of the abuse." She looked at me. She said, "Thank you." The room applauded. I nodded. I did not stand up. I did not need the spotlight. I just needed the vindication. After the meeting, Frank came up to me. He said, "I owe you an apology." I sat on that board and I watched Evelyn issue those fines, and I did not ask questions. I should have. I said, "You should have. But you are fixing it now." He said, "We are. And we are making sure it does not happen again." A few days later, I got a letter from the state HOA ombudsman. They had completed their investigation. They found that Evelyn had violated state HOA laws by issuing fines without proper notice, by backdating enforcement documents, and by threatening homeowners with illegal actions. The ombudsman referred the case to the state attorney general for possible criminal charges. I do not know if charges were ever filed. I do not know what happened to Evelyn after that. I sold the house in May and moved to a neighborhood without an HOA. But I kept the evidence. I kept the timeline. I kept the doorbell footage. I kept the gate logs. And I kept the email where Evelyn said, "I can make this a lean conversation in one email." Because that line, the one she said with so much confidence, became the proof of her intent when the lawsuit went to discovery. The management company disciplines the rep who enabled it. The regional manager sent a formal letter to every homeowner in Silver Slush Court, apologizing for the lack of oversight and announcing that the local rep had been reassigned and that new protocols were in place. At the public meeting moment where the minutes turn against Karen, Carol read the section of the old enforcement policy that Evelyn had ignored. She read it out loud, slowly, emphasizing every word. And then she said, "This policy was in place the entire time. It was ignored. That ends now." Karen's own clip proves the opposite of her claim. The doorbell footage showed Evelyn removing the snow stake and then fining me for not having it. Her own actions destroyed her credibility. Ron stopped by my house a week before I moved. He brought a six-pack. We sat on my porch in the fading spring light, snow finally gone, the neighborhood quiet. He said, "You know, people are still talking about what you did. You are a legend around here." I said, "I just wanted to sell my house." He said, "You did more than that. You stopped a scam. You got people their money back. You got Evelyn kicked off the board." I said, "She did it to herself. I just made sure people saw it." Ron said, "Most people would not have fought. They would have paid the fines and moved on." I said, "I could not afford to. And once I saw what she was doing, I could not let it go." Ron raised his beer. He said, "Two fighting back." I raised mine. I said, "To HOA accountability." We drank. The sun set. The neighborhood was quiet. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. A month after I moved, I got a message from Linda, the neighbor who had refused to be Evelyn's spy. She said the new enforcement policy was working. She said violations were way down. She said people felt safer in their own homes. She also said Evelyn had tried to run for a board seat in a neighboring HOA and had been rejected after someone sent the board a copy of the state ombudsman report. I smiled when I read that. Evelyn's reputation had followed her. Her own enforcement record had become her permanent record. I never saw Evelyn again. I never heard from her. I never got another threatening email or another backdated notice. But I did get one more letter from the management company. It was a formal settlement check, along with a release agreement. The check covered all of my legal fees, all of the fines I had paid, and a settlement amount for harassment and emotional distress. I signed the release. I cashed the check. I used the money to cover my moving costs. And I made one promise to myself. I would never live in another HOA. The story spread. Other homeowners in other neighborhoods heard about what happened at Silver Slush Court. Some of them reached out to me. They asked for advice. They asked how to fight back. I told them the same thing every time. Document everything. Get witnesses. Know the rules better than the people enforcing them. And do not back down. Because HOAs rely on intimidation. They rely on people being too tired, too scared, or too broke to fight. They rely on homeowners not knowing their rights. But when you know your rights, when you have evidence, when you refuse to be bullied, the power shifts. And that shift is everything. I moved to a quiet street with no HOA, no rules about snow stakes, no compliance patrols, no fines for ice scrapers on porch ledges. I shoveled my own driveway. I put up my own decorations. I parked wherever I wanted. And every time it snowed, I thought about Evelyn, standing in my driveway at midnight, screaming about violations that did not exist, threatening me with tows and liens and fees. And I smiled. Because I won. Not because I was smarter, not because I was richer, not because I had connections. I won because I refused to be a victim. I won because I gathered proof. I won because I stood up in that hearing room and said, "This is wrong, and here is the evidence." And when you do that, when you shine a light on corruption, the corruption cannot survive. The last time I drove through Silver Slush Court, I saw the orange snow stakes still in place on driveways. I saw shovels on porches. I saw cars parked in driveways without fear. And I knew that the fight had been worth it. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.